Okay, so power constraints in and around London, I believe they're actually sort of impacting the build out of data center capacity in this area. I hadn't realized it got that serious. So yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely capacity limitations on the grid for sure. Data centers are becoming more power hungry now. I think that's partly the problem. Now that we're designing for AI, there are network upgrade, happening. There's talks of reforms to the regs, etc., by Ofgem, but it's not really happening quickly enough for the pipeline. So I think that's the problem. It's, we're designing for AI. We need more power than we ever did before, and upgrades aren't happening sort of quickly enough. Some of them are kind of 10 years off. So, there's limited availability of suitable land with power, making site acquisitions, more challenging, and more expensive. So, developers know that they need to engage early with network operators, but also with the risks, financial considerations, etc. They're also starting to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that. So you think that sort of London's loss is the rest of the UK's gain? So there are significant investments taking place elsewhere because of the limits in and around London, the southeast?
I certainly think it's, causing people to look at alternatives. Developers are looking elsewhere because of grid constraints, but also because there's better access to renewable energies, up in Scotland and elsewhere in the country. So that's high up on the agenda for developers at the moment. Land is cheaper, so we're seeing movement outside the M25 hub to Wales, Manchester, Newcastle, further north than that. We also know that the government's assigned data centres, critical national infrastructure, and that the levelling up agenda across the UK, is high, a high hot topic for them. So I wonder if there's a narrative around social and kind of the political reasons around it, as well, not just the more obvious reasons around power, land and cost.
But overall, the data center industry in the UK, there's still a lot of momentum. It's a positive. It might be changing the sort of demographics, if that's the right word, but overall, it's still quite a healthy sector. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, back in March this year, when Microsoft, announced that they were pulling back on some capacity, across the board, we were concerned. We had quite a few conversations about it. We thought that, a pause from such a significant, end user developer might have an impact on pipeline overall. But we've not really seen that actually. The slowdown never really materialized. So while we might have seen some developments, slow down, go on pause. But as quickly as one was, pausing, another couple were kind of, popping up. So we've never really seen that slow down. And if anything, it's more and quicker.
Okay, and as a result of this sort of, well, we call it a boom or expansion, there are some new contractors entering the market, what I guess is theoretically good news because they're, helping increase the supply chain capacity. But on the downside, possibly, do they all have the net? Clearly building data center infrastructure is a fairly skilled activity, I guess. So do they all have the necessary skills? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, we're seeing new contractors entering the market. Some of them have experience building logistics and manufacturing facilities, that kind of thing, which essentially is the shell element of a data center. So what we're also seeing is we're seeing new procurement kind of routes being explored by clients. So maybe GC1, GC2 type arrangements, or one of these new entrants partnering with an experienced MEP contractor for that that MEP fit out knowledge. And that's kind of how we're seeing these entrants get into the marketplace. I do think that we need to, with the pipeline strong, we do need to think outside the box when we're looking at procurement, because, if there is a small pool, that they can't do it, certain contractors can't do everything. So we do need to consider our options.
Okay, and in terms of the supply chain make it a bit stronger, is there more need for sort of collaboration, people working together? Is that one of the solutions?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think with any sort of complex project, collaboration is key to the success, really. solution kind of focused approaches are required between, all stakeholders. And I think partnerships are seen as a way forward for clients within their supply chain. So kind of going back to my previous comment regarding alternative procurement, approaches, close kind of coordination, collaboration between, all stakeholders, design teams, MEP contractors to work effectively is really important. I also think, data centers, are getting bigger, more capacity. There's often, campus delivery, so more than one building on one plot, on one campus, and with significant kind of pipeline, relationships, partnerships, collaboration, it's key, especially with speed to market being a kind of driving factor.
Okay, and maybe on the downside slightly, we've got tariffs, environmental regulations, and long lead times. So
Mm.
I think there's an element of data center construction caution. That sounds slightly contradictory compared to this massive expansion, but what's going on there? Why the caution?
Yeah. There's definitely caution. There's nervousness. I think teams are having to consider certain elements of the build further in advance than we might have. And there's greater emphasis on kind of risk management and that kind of approach from early stages. So definitely caution. But obviously, with the demand as it is, it's not stopping anyone.
Yeah. I think one of the ways folks are addressing it in terms of certainly the main contractors, they're taking sort of sharing measures. So what
Yeah.
does that look like? What does that involve?
Yeah, I think where main contractors in the past might have been expected to take on, a lot of the risk when, building out a development, there's unwillingness now. Maybe they've got a bit more, authority with a smaller pool, but there's unwillingness now within the main contractor market with clients having to kind of share some of this risk. So, negotiations around contract terms, T's and C's, security provisions, inclusion of fluctuation clauses, that kind of thing into contracts, to make that kind of risk apportionment more palatable or palatable for all parties. Um, I think it's come from I don't want to talk about COVID, but ripple effects from the last 5 years. We have a COVID conflicts in Europe, um, tariffs recently imposed by the US. I think more than the tariffs, because sometimes they're not actually, don't actually affect anything, but it's the uncertainty around kind of retaliatory tariffs and just really not knowing what could happen. There's a bit of volatility there. So I think, while things do reset themselves eventually, there is definitely that natural cautiousness because of what's happened in the past. And also with the value of some of these projects, they're huge, so the stakes are higher. And I think the only way really forward is to take a sensible view around risk and risk apportionment. Because the last thing we need as well is more contractors going into administration and struggling. So yeah.
But in terms of the overall pool of contractors at the moment delivering data center projects, it is growing. So that's sort of good news to feed sort of cope with this predicted expansion that we're going to see.
It's growing, but it doesn't happen quickly. All developers want prior experience when delivering data set. We talked a little bit earlier. They want prior experience. They want a portfolio of projects which have been successfully delivered. So it takes time for the pool of contractors to be built up significantly. And with such growth in the data center market, it's probably not being built up quite as quickly as the demand is there, if you like. It takes 2 or so years to deliver a project, and that's kind of one project under your belt. And to get that experience is quite a slow process. But yeah, it is starting to happen, I think.
Okay, and I guess the government sort of got a positive message around data centers and clearly these AI growth zones or hubs, whatever they're called, is increasing confidence in the data center future. So, I mean, in conclusion, is it fair to say that there's pretty much a positive picture for the UK data center sector, or are there any possible clouds on the horizon? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've seen positive steps from the government in the last year or so for sure. Their industrial strategy focuses on, high growth sectors such as AI. They consider data center development part of their growth plan. Um, you know, they've created the AI Energy Council to address growing concerns of, you know, environmental impacts, that kind of thing. You know, we're hearing every week of, you know, new investments or new developments getting planning permissions, and so it is a positive picture. Um, you know, I think it comes with caution. It is a positive picture, but you know, it's going to come with challenges. You know, there's a lot of talk around skills. You know, do we have the skills to deliver what's required? You know, we're talking about contractors. Do we have enough contractors? So I think there's work to be done. We need to continue to think outside the box in terms of some of these challenges and coming up with solutions and working together on this really.
Okay, so maybe is it fair to say that, I mean, number one problem or thing to address seems to be power. It's always power. There's not enough power, but do you
Yeah.
think it's also added to that, which is clearly very important? You think skills and the contractor pool is a possible bottleneck if not addressed in a sort of timely fashion? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. We need, you know, assuming we can get power, you know, which you know we will, but we need to deliver these projects. We need to deliver them quickly, and it takes manpower, if you like, to do that, and skilled, you know, skilled people, skilled individuals to deliver on that. So yeah, that's absolutely a challenge for sure. Yeah.
And I just wonder as well, are those um, sort of areas, are they very much within our control in the country, or are we competing across, you know, larger markets, whether it's Europe or whatever, for the same skills, or is it pretty much a local market when it comes to contractors and skills?
Yeah, I think we don't have a unique problem here. You know, we're building out data centers across Europe, you know, quickly. And you know, in the past we have seen, you know, a lot of contractors just move around Europe to new locations they haven't necessarily worked in previously. We've seen kind of partnerships between kind of local contractors doing the shell and core, and then you know the MEP contractors coming from the more a global experienced contractor used to delivering data centers coming in to do the fit out and having to think around things like that. So I definitely think there's a lot of mobility within the sector. People are willing to kind of become mobile and move, I don't know, to the UK but it's not going to solve the problem in its entirety. We do need the skill set here. And I think there is quite a lot of investment into establishing that skill set, you know, with you know, trainees, etc., programs and that kind of thing. It's just the speed of growth of the sector and kind of that keeping up that I think's, you know, the challenge.
Yeah, and just maybe finally, when it comes to that speed of growth, do you think it's sustainable and sort of uh, mature in terms of people understand what is required, or do you think there's potentially an element of speculation, you know, people jumping into the space and think, oh, well, if we build a data center, the people will come and join in? Do you have any sort of sense as to whether it is, you know, the numbers being talked about are real, or if there's a lot of people who are, say, just fueling the fire because they're all piling into the space thinking it's a good place to make money at the moment?
Yeah, I think a bit of both, really. You know, no fuel without fire, and then chicken and egg, and all the rest of it. But yeah, I definitely think that there is. Look, we can't get away from AI is coming, so we need data centers that can you know accommodate that. So when you can evidently see that the demand is there, you can't. You know, it's hard to think that it's all smoke without fire. However. And I do think in setting it up that way, you're kind of over preparing yourself, if nothing else. Perhaps not everything will come off, and I think you know things go in cycles with Microsoft pulling capacity. You know, there's going to be someone else down the line as well that might reset the market a little bit. But I definitely think there's a steady upward trajectory.
Okay, it's been great to chat, and thanks so much for sharing so many great insights into what's going on. Clearly, it's a sort of fast-moving, complicated scenario, but it's interesting to see some of the other angles. As I say, power is this seems to be the, yeah, understandably the obsession, but there are other things going on. So really
Yeah.
appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.